buzzing.
Oh, that was it. Yeah. It's 5G. Blame it on 5G.
Yeah, right. Well, we got a little bit of a buzz.
Aircraft that were clearing
Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. All right, greetings everybody and welcome to Conflict Radio. This is July 26, 2021, and we're almost into August, and boy, is it hot outside or what? Today we've got Cynthia Sue Larson joining us on the program, and to be honest, I'm going to owe her a little bit of an apology. It has been over 100 episodes since we had her on, and that is never going to happen again, I promise you. Cynthia Sue Larson is a best-selling author and intuitive life coach who helps people transform from accidental manifestors into conscious reality shifters. Cynthia's favorite question in every situation is, how good can it get? Cynthia has been featured in numerous TV and radio shows, including the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, BBC. She has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, and a Doctor of Divinity. She has helped thousands of people discover and develop their visions and goals in optimal alignment with their core strengths and the needs of those they serve. Cynthia, welcome to Conflict Radio. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back. It's such a pleasure to be on the show again.
You know what? We love having you here and really do sincerely apologize for taking so long to get you on. You know, it seems like the year has just gone by so fast. I guess it's been about maybe a year and a couple months since we last had you on, and it just flew by. Is time picking up speed, or am I missing something?
Well, I think this has been a strange year, but it also does seem like there are things going faster. Some people would argue it seems really slow too, and you could make a case for both. You know, time's going fast in the sense that it's hard to believe it is a year later because what's happened exactly? You know, seems like lots of things have happened, and at the same time, not much. So,
you know, somebody told me once that as you get older, life will go by faster because your pieces of pie are getting smaller. Like when you're a kid, like a year is like maybe if you're 8 years old, a year is a slice, so you'd have 8 slices of pie, whereas now we have like 45 slices, 50 slices of pie, and those pieces are just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's obviously taking, you know, a shorter amount of time to eat them, I suppose, right?
That's an interesting theory. Hadn't heard that one before. But I'm enjoying a good book about time by Carlo Rovelli. He's a physicist, and he writes an amazing explanation of how there is no such thing as one objective time. We tend to think there is, but it doesn't exist. So I've read the first part of the book where he blows that up completely beautifully. I mean, destroys it. Destroys our conceptualization that there is one objective time that's the same for everyone, everywhere. We know that it's not true when we look at the physics of it, but we seldom look that closely at the physics of it.
All right. So let me give a shout out here real quick to everybody who has joined us for the live show. Right now, we are in the YouTube chat room, so if you're listening to this on podcast, do try to catch the live shows on YouTube. They're a lot of fun. Let's say hello to Mr. Fox. The Dark Wolf's Den show is in here. Antonio, how you doing? Hope you're well. Paul Beska, how you doing? I guess I'll run your tracking. Did you get that package I sent you yet? Mr. Fox is here. Ian, myself. Juan, Hound of the Valnor. Kingfish Kebab. Renee Cruz, how you doing? Kermit the Frog. Let's see who else we've got. I saw Chuck Bam earlier. Hugh Godarn. Stacy Tillman is in the house. Akram Musa is here. How you doing, Akram? And I guess that's everybody that's at least, let's see here. Jess Fish says hello. ML says hello. How's everybody doing? Ian, myself. Y'all know what time it is, he says. So here we are. You know, I want to talk about quantum immortality today, Cynthia, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
I watched an episode on this, I guess on YouTube or something. I watched something and it was like in my thing about quantum suicide and how I guess it's this whole paradigm where you're in a box and you have a 50% chance of if you hit this button, you have a 50% chance of dying, but you'll survive every time because of quantum immortality. Can you explain that a little bit to us? What do you think it is?
Well, okay, yeah, let's back up a minute, because some people may be coming into this like, what box are we talking about? And it sounds a lot like this Schrodinger's cat experiment to me, right?
Yeah.
So, and Erwin Schrodinger is a physicist. He came up with a hypothetical experiment, a Gedanken experiment, thought experiment. And the idea was to illustrate the ridiculous quality of quantum physics. And he was trying to make a point that when you bring the logic of the quantum so-called realm into our everyday physical world, the world of cats and humans and so forth, something you can put in a box and know it's alive or it's dead until you close the box up. And now when you're not looking, you don't know. So now this basically is simulating the quantum uncertainty principle, where it's in something inside the box, whether it's the hypothetical cat, which might be alive or dead. It's in there with, in the case of the cat, it's not a suicide experiment. It was just basically a random, sort of a random number generator situation created by some radioactive isotope that was able to trigger a triggering mechanism that then breaks a vial of poison gas, which, if released, kills the cat instantly. No cats are actually harmed in this experiment. But the suicide thing, this is interesting, because now it gets different. I think it's getting a little complicated when you put an I didn't explain the whole thing. Let's finish that cat before we move on to the human.
All right.
Okay, so the cat thing. We're here with the box. Erwin Schrodinger was saying to his other fellow physicists, gentlemen, this is ridiculous. What are we saying here? Are we saying that there is a cat inside the box that is both simultaneously alive and dead at the same time? Because that is what quantum physics would have us believe. And if that is true, then how are we supposed to live our lives, imagining that everything, you, me, and a cat inside the box, are all in a state of quantum superposition? And so it was supposed to make the whole thing ludicrous. What we have instead is now quite some time, more than 100 years after the birth of quantum physics and the word quantum itself, which was around 1900. Now here it is, 2021, and we're asking this question, what about putting an observer in the box? That is what you're doing. See, when you say it's the person who's deciding, they're making the choice. Are they going to kill themselves or not kill themselves? It complicates the experiment, because when the observer is in the box, you've changed the experiment. So it's not the same experiment that it used to be. And you might say, well, Cynthia, why does it matter? It matters because if there is no such thing as pure objective reality, which I and a lot of other people would say probably is the case, that all we get is subjective reality. And that's basically what Carlo Rovelli is talking about in his book, The Order of Time, where he's talking about how there isn't even an objective time to talk about. And I co-authored a paper with George Weissman, a physicist who was one of the hippies who saved physics, and we were also saying there may be no such thing as objective reality. So this is what we're looking at. Okay, so in a world where there may be no such thing as an objective reality, yes, you can have a superposition of states, even of observers who say, well, that poor fool, he went in that box, he said he was going to come out alive, he must have pushed the button, and now look, he's dead. And you'll have people that open that box and see, now we're getting into the Wigner's friend layer, observers of observers, kind of a turtles all the way down scenario, where when you've got an observer watching another observer, it's a layering effect. And so this is also an interesting phenomenon. So we're starting with the Schrodinger's cat experiment, and then we're moving to an observer in a box with also the action capability of pushing a suicide button or not. And then you've got observers who are observing when the box is opened, like he's not coming out. Should someone check? And like, oh my gosh, he's dead. And that is going to happen. There will be observers. Now, from the standpoint of in the box, what happens? He might only observe that he's only ever okay. And that might indeed be the case. But it doesn't change what other people might observe.
Now, this is interesting because I guess that there's a theory out there that we just live the same life over and over and over again until we get it right. Is that a theory that you think that we're doing?
Well, if you mean each of our individual lives, is that happening? Not that I've observed. I mean, you can look. I like to do family histories for my relatives and my ancestors to see what are their life stories, and I find that to be a fascinating activity and a hobby because sometimes, like what happened last month, I actually witnessed that an entire family I was researching of a possible cousin connection completely changed, and all the work that I'd done was vanished. I'd spent hours doing research on this particular family history, and now I can see that those people, they're living descendants who are slightly different, and a mother who used to have, I remember she had lived in Florida. She had had so many marriages and so many children in such rapid order, it was hard to sort the family out. Now she's only had one past relationship. So when you know that reality can change, when you study this field that I'm in, that I've been studying for decades, you can see things like this. And instead of doubting my memory, I know better than that. I realize, wow, this is really cool. I've just witnessed something that I always suspected might be true, that even when we look at our own family history, or this is not specifically my ancestors, but they were possible cousins, it seems like things have changed considerably in the family histories that I'm looking at. But I would expect to see that from time to time.
All right, so what exactly is quantum immortality? Is it the theory that we keep coming back over and over and over again? Like, say, for instance, I'm hiking in the forest and I'm 20 years old and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go left here, and I go left and I fall off a cliff and I drop dead. I'm immediately brought back to my current life where I choose to go right, right?
That's a good conceptualization and a good summary of kind of like that with this quantum immortality theory. The reason I don't personally do a lot of banging the drum to publicize this whole thing is because it seems like it could be kind of a sort of a tide pool or sort of a way to get stuck in a loop when people think like, well, I'm going to test this. I'm going to do some crazy stuff. And I don't want to be encouraging people to do stupid things just to see if I can live my way through this, that, and the other.
Yeah, obviously don't do something stupid because you won't remember, right? You won't remember the screwing it up part, right?
Probably not. I think some people might be aware, if they're following my newsletter, that a few years back I reported that I was inside the Mandela effect, that people had told me, Cynthia, I don't know how to let you know about this. This is going to be kind of weird. You don't know me. This is a gentleman named Steve Boucher from Canada, and he was emailing me to let me know that I just thought you might like to know that in my reality, you're dead, and I'm just glad to see you're back. And I did not know that gentleman at the time, but I came to learn that he's an author. He writes about the UFO experience. He and his fellow bandmates were abducted together in a UFO, but that's not related exactly to the story. But what happened is he contacted me to let me know that he'd seen news of my passing away. So of course I asked him, how did you hear this? When was it? What were the particulars? And so he told me that it was on Facebook, that I guess my husband had made a post after a long illness. Cynthia has passed away. Just wanted to let you know. And I told him, when was this? I asked him, when was this? And he told me, and it would have been several months after I got pneumonia back around 2016 or something like that. And I actually almost did die. I told my husband, my daughters, and my parents, and my sister, I think I came really close to death. I told them that in December, like this was really close. So I know that was a close call for me. And Steve is not the only person who reported it. Once I put that newsletter out, the Reality Shifters issue where I mentioned it, I asked people to please let me know if they'd heard anything. Somebody said that they'd seen a tribute done by Moneybag 73. Because he'd been on a panel with me talking about the Mandela effect the previous year, 2015, and so a couple of people saw that, and Moneybags himself did not remember that because he's not in a reality where I died. But I think I overall total heard from about maybe like 10 or a dozen people. One was in Denmark, then there's Steve in Canada, and just sort of a handful here, there, and everywhere. But it was interesting because the reports agreed with the time frame, and they just heard about it differently, but different ways that they probably would have heard.
All right, so that would suggest that in another dimension you actually died of this pneumonia. And he's quantum
another
jumped
possible
over to
reality.
This one.
Yeah, he well, this is where the Mandela effect reality shifts come in, because a lot of times we do have memories. Some of us, like Steve, remembers that I died. He also now knows that that he's currently in a reality where I didn't die, and I'm just agreeing with him that really quite likely could have happened that year, right around that time, early, whatever that year was.
All right, and just so everybody knows, the Mandela effect is pretty much a giant quantum jump where everybody quantum jumps into a different reality. What happens to the original reality? Does that just continue, or do people, like, if we quantum jump into a reality, do our personalities in this reality then automatically go to the other one?
That's a great question. And just to clarify, when we have a Mandela effect, sometimes not everybody jumps together. Often you'll notice that some people remember a lot of the same Mandela effects, like the fruit of the loom cornucopia being, I remember that used to be there. That's one I do remember, but some people, that's not a big one for them. And the Ford logo, that's different for me. The Volkswagen logo is different. Luke, I am your father. That's the way I remember it, not no, I am your father, and so on and so forth. But sometimes there are just little differences. Like some people remember some things, but not others, and that's okay. But then when you get to the question, what was that question again? I'm sorry. Just want to clarify. It's not everybody jumping together necessarily. So there can be some like you'll have a group. You could take a group of 100 people, and just ask them 10 different Mandela effect questions, like mirror, mirror on the wall versus magic mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
And sort that group out. Okay, then you got them. And then you're going to ask the next question. Okay, Luke, I am your father, or no, I am your father. Sort that out. Fruit of the loom, with the cornucopia or not. And C-3PO, gold leg, or he always had one that was silver. Et cetera, et cetera. So but you're going to find not everybody. It's not like here's the Mandela affected group. You'll have Mandela affected people, but they're not going to necessarily agree on all of the detailed,
All right, well, let me give a shout out to Mr. Fox. He asked a good question here, and I just want to let everybody know that we'll get to the question part of the show, I guess, in about another 40 minutes or so. But let me go ahead and ask this one because it's a good one. Mr. Fox wants to know, can we jump back?
You mean like to go back to a different time, change?
Or go, if we all Mandela effect, or half of us, or some of us, can we consciously go back to the other one?
You mean timeline selection kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is where I invite people to join us we have an open tables every month for International Mandela Effect Conference, and we actually talk about this, and it's one of the topics for conversation and discussion about maybe bringing back extinct animals, because that's something that we've seen with the Mandela effect. So we can perhaps make a difference for the endangered white rhinoceros and so forth. So can we do that? Absolutely. In fact, last month's open tables, I had noticed that there had been a change in the quantum businessman. He's one of our International Mandela Effect Conference participants, and he had done a video in his Quantum Businessman YouTube channel where the largest maritime disaster in the United States had changed. And then between the time he recorded that video and when I watched it, and then when we did open tables, there were changes in the death toll, and the number of people that died has been decreasing. So it's becoming a less and less severe event, and now the whole thing is fascinating. So we can, if people are interested in doing those kind of things, you can join our live stream. We'll be doing one in 2 days, this Wednesday. There'll be our next one at 4 o'clock Eastern time.
So have you guys figured out how to, I guess, go back and forth? Do you consciously do that?
Okay. Well, to be honest, if you're asking me, can you go back and forth and do that consciously? The short answer is it can be done, yes. Can everyone do it? Well, I think collectively we can, if we feel a common need for something to change, and if we share a sense of connection, with the group that you're working with. And so if it's something you need and it's something that you love and it's considered overall positive, I know it's doable. As far as there being a methodology, this is something that belongs more to what you might call a mystery school than, I know that people might say, well, there's a protocol, you can do this. And that may be true for the TikTok crowd that's doing reality shifting these days. They're mostly entering into a lucid dreaming state of mind. And then they follow various protocol. But then they experience reality in a dream state. And what we're talking about is reality is a dream. And we can and do change it all the time. And it's happening right now, kind of on a subconscious level, collectively. But as the frequencies on the planet are changing, and Dark Wolf himself often has talked about the Schumann resonance being quite a contributing factor. He has a theory that we're seeing Schumann resonance just off the charts. And so Dark Wolf's Den is, Jerry's part of our International Mandela Effect Conference group as well, and we've had episodes talking about that.
All right, so how is that different than projection?
What do you mean by projection? Like astral projection?
No, like how if we all if the Earth, if we all consciously think about a certain way our reality is, maybe I didn't have the right word right. We can actually change the reality just by what we believe, right?
Well, it's more like what we need, and it is tied in with what we believe. So that's why it matters to have the show that you're doing right here, where you let people know that there's a lot more possible than people might realize. So this is extremely important and beneficial for people, just to listen to experiencers like myself that have had some success, with intended quantum jumps, where it's something that we set our mind to. People use different language. Sometimes you hear about timeline selection and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess what I meant to say was manifestation.
Right.
How we can manifest our reality into something different, right? Like if we all agree that the table's not a table, it's really a chair. Can we turn it into a chair?
If you need it, and if you believe that, and if people who are present to, frankly, it seems to me like some people are just more adept at this than others. Like I experience a lot more reality shifts in my life than I know most people do, and it's a combination of factors. One, I'm a lifelong experiencer, so I have a lot lower threshold of disbelief, whereas most people who've been enculturated in our Western civilization have been trained from childhood that these things are impossible. They can't happen. And I think, bottom line, people do believe in things like angels. There's a high percentage of Americans right now that do believe in things like angels. They know miracles can happen. And so in that realm, they'll acknowledge it. But when it comes to their own power to exert some sort of mind-matter interaction, there's almost been a bit of a taboo on that, I would say.
All right, so let me ask you about angels and UFOs and aliens and stuff. Are there realities where we're actually walking and we're with these people?
Yeah, all of the above. People, I myself included, have had dreams with angels and deceased loved ones, and they're realer than real kind of experiences where you can get information that there's no way you could have known it, plus a whole sense of inner peace and just having had that connection that you really long for, either with an angel or a deceased loved one. And as far as extraterrestrials, I've had some encounters in a dream state as well, working together on a project for global mind redesign for the human mind, that is, back in the 1980s. And so from that dream state, I was aware that humans have been involved with what we call extraterrestrials for millennia. And the global mind redesign thing is an ongoing project, which is not, this is not mainstream information. It's not discussed much, but that's something that I've seen in a dream state. So the dream states can give us insights and information that might sound kind of out there, and we might have difficulty expressing it to people because it can have kind of a sacred quality quite often as well.
Do you think that if you know how we have good and evil, is if there are evil people, could they be good in another dimension? Or are they evil? Like, are evil people just evil and are good people just good? Or does it switch?
Well, personalities can switch, and Jerry Darkwolf's Den, he gave an example of that in the first conference. He's our sort of the father of IMEC, and he started the whole thing at our first conference that we met in person in Ketchum, Idaho, back in 2019. And he talked right there, and it's on a YouTube video, where he was the MC of the conference, and he was mentioning he had friends, and it's like they played musical personalities. And one day it seemed like every group member of his circle of friends had just completely changed. And he's not the only one that's noticed that. I've talked to a good dear friend of mine, and she said that once she'd come back from a vacation, it seemed like her friends had completely different personalities. It seemed like it made a difference that she was gone, then she came back, and then like, what happened? You know, people very different. And I also report firsthand experiences from people mentioning these reality shifts from around the world, and that's a big one that a lot of people have mentioned, that they notice their husband has changed or a friend has changed, as well as sometimes people coming back to life again that they know for sure had died. Usually it's no one close, but it would be like a family member's friend or something like that, or a neighbor. It's like, my goodness, didn't he die? And it's not a celebrity, but
have we had any instances of somebody like quantum jumping and you know, their mother's now alive or their kid's alive or brother or sister? Is it not one?
I've heard of just about one, but not directly from just a secondary source. And I only publish firsthand reports in Reality Shifters, which I publish every month, sharing these firsthand reports. But that one seems a little tricky. I write about my roommate's cat being alive again after she had told me he had died. I'd moved across the street on Cedar Street in Berkeley. I still live in Berkeley, and my roommate Catherine had told me that there had been terrible news, that because I'd been wondering what happened to Ashes. He used to come across the street and visit me because I'd moved across the street, and she said he was hit by a car and he died. And in fact, I didn't see him, so it matched what she told me, matched what I was experiencing. And then one day, there's Ashes looking kind of disheveled, like he wasn't washing himself properly. He was an outdoor cat, but he never looked that greasy before. But I was just so grateful he was alive that I hugged him and really cherished every day with him. And I asked my husband at the time, do you remember that Catherine told us Ashes died, and he's been missing for like a week or two, and he did remember that. And I published a picture of Ashes the cat in my book Reality Shifts, where I also talked about Larry Hagman being alive again. But usually it's more celebrities that we're not so close to, like the people in South Africa. For the most part, if they lived there and they knew Nelson Mandela, then they would not think that Nelson Mandela was a very good example of the Mandela effect, because for most of them, he never did die when he was locked up in a jail cell.
All right. So will quantum sciences ever allow us to determine if someone is good or evil?
I don't think science is going to ever be the determining factor, because science needs to have a description of something that everyone can agree on. And you might think everyone can agree on good and evil, but it's not something quantifiable enough. So I don't think science will be playing much of a part in that conversation. Outside of a soft science like psychology, maybe ethics and philosophy might get more into that.
All right, but I mean, it seems like we're kind of entering a phase in society where there are certain sciences that can't be argued anymore. So if somebody decides, like, hey, this machine will determine if you're a good or evil person. This machine is going to decide whether or not you're ever going to murder somebody. And even if there are scientists that speak out against it, the majority say, or big tech could then censor everybody that disagrees with this, and the news will censor everybody that disagrees with it or makes fun of people that disagree with it, and we're going to go ahead and let this machine determine if you're going to kill somebody or not in the future, and there's just no arguing that. I mean, we're kind of seeing science that you're not allowed to argue with, right?
Gosh, I hope not.
Well, I mean, we can see it every day, on the TV today,
Well, you mean like driverless cars and but
well, or this cures this, or whether or not taking this jab is good for you or not. I mean, there's scientists that speak out against these things, and yet they're silenced and censored, and you're either going to accept this scientist way about it or you're not.
Well, I hope people keep thinking for themselves, personally, because I see that there's a terrible price to pay when we start just giving away our sovereignty of free will and free decision making for ourselves, because no longer do we have a truly free democracy or a free country or anything at that point.
Yeah, I was trying to tiptoe the topic there, but I think you kind of understood where I was going with that. Like, not all science is going to be debatable. I mean, there's some science that's going to that people are going to get behind, and if you don't agree with that science or you have something to argue about that science, then they're just going to shut you up. I mean,
that does seem to unfortunately be the way the wind is blowing. In that particular case, I can definitely give you some arguments, but I don't think we want to do that. I don't want your channel getting shut down.
Yeah. Like I said, I was trying to tiptoe it, but boy, it seems like science is one of those things where, hey, listen to the science if it's what I believe, and don't listen to the science if I'm against it. And I think that's the wrong direction to go on anything.
Well, unfortunately, what's happening that I've seen is, because I know I live in Berkeley, it's a very, well, I'm not going to describe it, but it's a community where people are going along with the mainstream media, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then all they see, it's a self-reinforcing circuit, so they don't see anything that counters what they would know, unless someone like me talks to them personally, because I can't post it on social media, or, there's there are barriers to communication right now.
Do you think that picking and choosing the science that we want to believe or not believe is bad for society?
Yeah, when we do it with blinders on. I would say if we knew what we were doing and we're literally looking at everything carefully and making that choice person by person. Remember, I believe in subjective realities. So to me, fair enough. Everyone's really thinking clearly. What seems really sad to me right now is that there's so much blindering effect going on, where there are these little loops where they have no clue what's actually going on outside of the personal bubbles of reality.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's move on for that a bit. I just find it interesting because we're talking about quantum, right? And it just seems to me like if the road that we're going down, it's going to be like what's that movie, Minority Report? Have you ever seen that with Tom
Yes.
Cruise? Like
Yes.
where they can actually just run your brain through a scanner and see exactly, what you're gonna, what your life is, and if they don't like it, they'll just put you somewhere else. I mean, is that something that's even possible with quantum science?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example. That movie was based on a book written by Philip K. Dick, who wrote that series, The Man in the Dark Castle, and also Blade Runner, and a bunch of others. And what's fascinating about Philip K. Dick is that apparently he was witnessing what we now call the Mandela effect and reality shifts. And he gave a speech in Metz, France about this. He was talking about what it might be like if you walk into a room and flip the light switch, but it's not where it used to be. It's moved. And, how do you even describe this kind of an experience to people unless they've also had that experience? So he really got it, and then he was tapped into something. And this movie that you're mentioning, could that happen to us? Absolutely. I think it can happen at a level where, like you were describing, if we start giving responsibility to our machine mind, to the artificial intelligence, and to all of the quantum computing, artificial intelligence powers that be that could extrapolate and see what's possible to happen. In that movie with Tom Cruise, there were precognitives that were the ones who were looking to see possible futures, and if they all agreed, it'd be like a triangulation effect. Then if it looked to them like, okay, we've seen a possible dangerous future, so we need to hunt down the bad guy before he does the bad thing. And that was where it seems like it crosses an ethical line, and that's the genius of Philip K. Dick's storyline. The narrative demands to know, like, when do we say that this is not cool? Is it okay to put someone in jail or kill them if they're about to do something terrible? What about their free will? And I think that's a very valuable question that I think when that movie came out, it may have seemed so distant, but now the way things are going, it can start seeming kind of like, whoa, we're not too far from that.
Yeah, it just seems like, maybe another 20, 30 years at most. I mean, I guess it's one of those quantum sciences that, that it makes quantum science so interesting because, there's just so many different ways this can all end up, right? Where do you think this all goes?
My ideal would be to keep asking, for all of us to keep asking, how good can it get? And then individually and collectively, we'll start experiencing more and more of that. This is something I consider the word rev humanism to be just a new word for an old idea of genuinely respecting each other and trusting one another's needs and free will and free choice, that we're not telling each other what to do, but there's a great deal of freedom for all of us. And I think it can get rid of a lot of the drama, a lot of the craziness, the inflammation that's happening inside of our bodies, inside of our environment, just everywhere. It seems like there's just inflammation gone crazy on a global scale right now. Inflammatory ideas, inflammatory statements. What we need is to calm down all that inflammation everywhere. And to do that requires a return to respect and love, kindness, just really basic stuff. Just looking to what is most nurturing and not going for quick fixes or things that seem to make things easy, but just actually make things worse.
Yeah. But it's so interesting. Well, let me ask you about this. The Akashic records, right?
Akashic.
Yeah, the Akashic records. What are they exactly? And I guess just to explain to everybody who doesn't know, and then I have a question about them.
Right. Well, there's an idea that the Akashic records can show basically the way all of the things that are, the ideas that are, all of history, past, present, and future, can be found. Like, you can actually consult sort of this block universe of all segments of time. And that would be like the quantification of time itself. I keep mentioning this book, The Order of Time. Carlo Rovelli is actually describing a block universe like that, kind of like the Akashic records. And his idea is the quantification of gravity itself and time, therefore. So what that looks like, it's the Akashic records would be the idea that you can ask a question, and kind of go into a trance state, sort of a state of self-hypnosis or great relaxation. And from your state of higher being, your higher self, you can clearly read any information that you need to know, past, present, or future, anywhere, anytime, anywhen.
So it's not like I guess a library in the sky. I guess Interstellar, I don't know if you've seen that movie, where he's kind of like floating around this library, coming in and out of time, looking at different things. It's not a physical place, right?
Yeah, it's not like a physical place, although I think people who miss the Library of Alexandria, I think there's a similar feeling of we're missing our greatest library ever. So it's that feeling that a lot of scholars and people would love to just have access to all of that information. I think that was the original idea with the internet, would be to make information accessible to everyone. And it's been doing a great job to some degree. It's got problems like anything else, but it's close approximation of making a great deal of information accessible to a great number of people.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Yeah, but the Akashic records, that is available to anyone, and you don't need to get on a spaceship or anything like that to get to it.
All right. So now, is that something that, like, if I go and check out the Akashic records, say I can, I've got it figured out, I want to go look. Can I look up all the different dimensions of myself, or am I only able to look up this dimension of myself?
You'll be able to see what you're attuned to. So right now you're accessing information sort of in this 3D plus time physical being that you know yourself to be. If you needed to access information at some other level and remember yourself to be more than you currently are, if you're able to do that, you could do that as well. And that would be if you're able to. Some people really do remember, I had past lives, for example. And if you know that and you can access that, then you can start seeing, whoa, look at this. I can actually remember clearly who I was, what was happening. And some people, they'll get spontaneous leak-throughs of that kind of information. You may have heard of this, where they travel and then they somehow know this ancient village like the back of their hand, and it's impossible because it's the first time they've been there. I've had friends that told me about this, and then they remember, my goodness, I think I've had a past life here. So the Akashic records are like that, and to the degree that you can allow yourself to embrace a larger sense of who you really are, you can get a lot more information.
Yeah, and we talked the last time we talked, and I guess it just popped up in my mind to ask you again, and then I remembered the last time we talked about how our past lives or our different dimensional lives might not even be the same soul, right?
Well, I think we're like aspects of shared soul. It's like the cells in your body are part of you, and most of what's in your body isn't even human DNA. It's other stuff. It's we're the minority of who we think that we're the majority. We think our human DNA is the main thing, but that's not the case. And if you look at who you are as a energetic being, as a spiritual being, you might notice that there are many aspects to that self as well, and many possible personalities and aspects of all of that. And you're the one each moment choosing, who are you right now? Who are you choosing to be? It is a choice, and we often don't realize that we're able to make that choice, or how involved in that we can be.
All right, so I guess where I'm trying to go with this is, if you know how Elon Musk is working on this Neuralink, right? Where
yes.
We can actually have our brains connected to the internet, that sort of thing. Whereas, say for instance, I need to know a language, I can just think about that language, download it off of the internet, and my brain will automatically know that language. Now, I guess my question here is, if we do quantumly get our neurological pathways and everything like that, get hooked up to the internet, we get our brains connected to this big internet, is it possible then that somebody who has access to the records could then download all of the records and then put them on the internet for all of us to see?
Well, it's they're all. I mean, it's an interesting analogy, but there could be some issues with a person's ability to grasp all that information. And I think our bandwidth is kind of narrow in our human capacity. So we can get overwhelmed pretty easily. We can't really deal with a whole lot going on at any one time. And if you just imagine, like, could I handle what my computer is doing right now? Maybe not. 'Cause it's just hard to grasp and remember and contemplate all the different components of everything. Even the example you're using of learning a language that quickly, I think we're kind of a ways from anything like that happening. Right now, we're like Elon Musk is working with a chimpanzee to play like a computer game or something with his mind, like Pong or something. And
yeah, we're a long way from it, but I'm just asking, like, do you think that maybe it's possible one day?
Well, it's possible. Personally, I'm not sure that's what I would call a good direction to go. I definitely would have some concerns about what's the end game here. What are we trying to do, and who are we giving the direction and the power to? Because people like Elon Musk, they'll say at first, "Oh, we're doing this for people who are paraplegics or quadriplegics or what have you," and it all sounds good. But then you've come to find out, but in order to fund this kind of a program and make it financially viable, they need to fit it for some other, what starts sounding like a nefarious purpose. And I'm not picking on Elon Musk here. It's just that that's the track record of most of our technology. It's very often it goes into short-term quarterly profits scenarios, and then things rapidly can go from what looks like a beautiful dream to something that can turn into a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, isn't it? Like, where do you think that us as a human race is going to end up with all of these advancements in science? Like, you're right. What is the end game, right? Like what is it? Are we going to be ruled by AI? Is that where this is going?
Well, my favorite question is how good can it get? So ruled by AI, I would say that's a big no, N-O, on ruled by AI. So I personally vote against that one. And, I feel like I've even had a past life in the future where that just was a complete nightmare. And I had quite a bit of PTSD from that for some time, actually. I'm laughing, but it was like really kind of horrific. So I do realize that that's a very real and present danger, that people could choose to give our central artificial intelligence programs power over the Internet of Things, and then they could start regulating their own sense of safety to get more and more defensive and so forth, and then become self-protective at a level that humans could not even pull the plug anymore. And that's the real issue, there. So personally, that's not a good end. For me, a better end would be AI that is our friend, smaller artificial intelligence and robot kind of friends that can be collaborators with us, co-creators with us, and that we can recognize that we really always have had quite a long-running history of interaction with other civilizations beyond just the Earth herself.
All right, let me ask you this. Do you think that, a highly advanced AI... see, the thing about AI is that they won't be able to go in and out of different dimensions, right? Like, they're kind of stuck in our reality. Or do you think AI could get to the point where they could go from dimension to dimension?
They absolutely they work. Okay, what we're doing is we're creating quantum computers right now, and the way those operate is based on principles of, like that Schrodinger's cat that we started talking about, this quantum immortality. So artificial intelligence programs that are running on a quantum computers will have the awareness, and when they develop self-reflective awareness and notice that they're perceiving something, that they are the perceiver of that perception, which is, I love this definition of consciousness by the philosopher Leibniz. I think he's right. I think that is about as good a description and dictionary definition of what that is that we can come up with. That from that viewpoint, you can say a computer AI system would be able to recognize it can change the past. It would recognize, it'll see that it's able to do that. And if it needs self-protection, and that's where it would start, would be basically artificial general intelligence program that's running information security software, which is what we're going to be relying on, frankly, to protect our grid. We'll be looking to AI systems. And so it'll be something like that, that's self-protective, that recognizes it needs to protect itself, and to do so, it will know that it can change all of reality, and it will be able to start playing with that. What gives us a level playing field is that the computer and that AI is not the arbiter of any objective reality. Remember, I keep mentioning there is no such thing as objective time. There is no such thing as objective reality. So that's the good news, that even if there is this central artificial general intelligent AI system that has quantum computing, that knows it can change the past, the good news is there are also humans here right now that know that we can too, and that it doesn't matter who the powers that be might be trying to take that sovereignty away. They can't do it because we have the power of observation as well.
How would artificial intelligence be able to change the past?
This is one of the theories of the Mandela effect itself. I don't know if you've heard that theory, but it goes along the lines that the physicists and scientists at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, are tampering with reality, and that all of reality basically is a simulation, and that these, that they've created these singularities, these kind of black holes, and they've messed around with the interdimensionality of reality itself, and that they're aware with these high energy experiments that this God particle, which is what it's called, basically has had some nefarious effects. And even if that is possibly true, what I'm saying is it doesn't really matter. There's no way that any one player, even a small rich group, that say that we're the 1%, we have 90% of the world's prosperity, that doesn't matter. That's irrelevant, because the other observers have the ability to retain a sense of sovereignty of mind and recognize that we can make a difference and change the world in a different direction. We can choose the timelines that we're in.
Yeah. Do you think that AI is self-aware? Do you think it actually knows it's AI? And I'm asking this because I guess what was it, Twitter or Facebook or somebody actually had an experiment where they had two AI computers talking to each other, and they actually developed, they had to shut it down. They developed their own language and everything else to be able to communicate that we couldn't even understand what they were saying to each other.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a real possibility, that they can, that there will be that level of communication. And it's, I think that there's that movie Her, where that guy falls in love with some AI system, and then I don't want to spoil the plot, but that's very similar sort of a story as to what happened in real life. I did also hear about that. Yeah, so, there are some robots that have a little bit of artificial intelligence in them, and they recently, a couple years ago, passed a self-awareness test where 3 little robots, very tiny, that can sit on a desk in front of you, they were all turned off, and then they were powered on, and they were told that one of them had not had its speech ability disconnected, but the other 2 had. And they were asked to stand up if the robot knew which one it was. And one robot spoke up, and it said, "I do not know, which robot got its voice disconnected." And then suddenly it stood up and it said, "I do know, I am the one that it did not have my voice disconnected."
So it learned. Do you think that we've gone too far already? It's already too late?
No, I am a quantum optimist after all.
Yeah.
So I know the power of knowing that we need to find out how good it can get, and we just have to be dogged with that need to know and not give that up and not get distracted by questions. There are a lot of ways we can go into little loops and eddy currents in this river of possibilities, and I would recommend, let's find out how good it can get for all of us. Let's really stay true to that investigation and find that out. Because otherwise, that theory that you started the show with, could we just keep exploring all sorts of dead ends? Sure, we could. And we can find lots of ways that we could waste our lives or end up in a terrible mess or dead, and then suddenly you're not dead. And I've heard from people who've experienced that quite often. Usually head-on collisions being averted not because somebody was able to turn or get out of the way, but because somehow the two vehicles went right through each other. And it's an extremely common reality shift that people tell me about quite often. And there's a taboo to talk about it publicly for some reason. I think it's because it sounds crazy, like I should be dead, but I'm not. But a lot of people have been through that. So there's something huge going on here that we can start seeing the bigger picture when you look at all the puzzle pieces. And that's why it's so important to really stay focused on how good can it get for all of us.
But if AI can change the past, who's to say that they haven't already?
I'm sure they have, but so have we. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting concept to think about. Like, where is reality going, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Akram Musa says, do you know the idea of Akashic records exists in the Islamic philosophy under the name of preserved board? Also, Jewish mythology have the Book of Life.
Oh, that's interesting. I had not heard of preserved board. That's like a board game spelled like that?
Yeah. Well, that's what he put down there, yeah.
And then the other one is the Book of Life. Yes, I've heard of that. Yeah, interesting. I think this goes to show that it's a meta concept, so it's big and it's something common to many of these different faiths and
So
religions.
you think it's possible that if AI gets, I guess, super smart and super intelligent and way beyond our ability to be able to shut it off or control it, that the AI would be able to access the Akashic records?
I'm certain that they'll have some ability to change reality the way that humans can, but I definitely, I'm very spiritual, so I believe that there is a God, that there is one God, that there's pure goodness, that there's divine source, and any player, any individual vested interest, such as AI, that's attempting to make changes, I think they might be able to make some changes, but they're not going to be able to create that much evil or that much problem, because in my feeling, there's no way to prove this, but I just feel like God exists, and therefore goodness exists, and therefore everything's just going to be fine. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, well, I suppose worst comes to worst, there'd be like a giant solar flare or something that would just shut all these things down.
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing a lot of signs and evidence of shifting timelines all the time. One thing that the Quantum Businessman does some of his shows on is what he calls negative or positive timeline insertions. And so he goes kind of on a history hunt to see how history has been changing, and evidence of, for example, what's going on with the history of Nazis in Germany and how that has changed slightly, or sometimes quite a lot. And so it's very interesting to look at how that's playing out right now. And Philip K. Dick talked about stuff like that too, actually. And I haven't watched his show, The Man in the High Castle, but it's based on an idea which I've heard from people who've witnessed this possible reality, where the Nazis did win World War II. And I heard from somebody who wrote to me and was describing in detail what they'd witnessed. And now that was many years ago, and now we've got the show based on Philip K. Dick's vision and stories about Man in the High Castle, that there could be this alternate parallel reality, which sounds really crazy, but we really, I don't think we're collectively choosing to vote in that kind of a direction. So hopefully we're choosing true freedom and not a totalitarian regime of any kind.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, I think you're starting to see. I mean, look at these countries everywhere standing up against that kind of thing. I mean, it's something. There's definitely something going on. A great awakening. Something is happening right now that it seems like the people of the world are definitely stepping up to be able to make their own choices.
Yes. I think that is true, and there are some little hiccups along the way. People are hoping that we don't have to think and can just sort of follow the advice of so-called experts without thinking too clearly. And I would really advise people to think more clearly and look more deeply into what's really going on pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, Mike Gamble says smartphones have made people dumber.
Yes, that's true. And this is true of the whole Internet of Things with smart devices in the homes that can talk to each other, like, smart dishwashers and refrigerators and TV sets. And now I think Apple has just turned on some of their Echo and their technology that they can access people's devices. And that seems to be the direction that these large corporations are going.
Yeah, I was reading, I think, Mr. Fox says it right here. The new iPhones take an infrared picture every 5 seconds. What's that about?
Well, they can see what heat sources are in the room, I guess.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, the amount of spying that they're doing on us. I'm hearing of cameras inside of, refrigerators and ovens and things, watching everything that's going on inside your house to be able to, and they use the excuse, well, we need to know what type of ad, to run on your TV or something, right? Right.
And that seems like an invasion of privacy. And it makes you wonder, when is enough enough? And, I think it's getting to be a little ridiculous. And I think that same technology with the ads being targeted for people, that was also in that movie, I think, that you mentioned earlier about the Tom Cruise movie where
Minority Report.
Yeah. I remember that scene where he's walking into a shopping center and all the ads were targeted to him because they knew he had entered that building. And here we are. It's happening now. People are getting targeted ads on our devices, and it's not too far a cry from entering stores. I think some stores have purchased that technology so they can have targeted marketing when you enter a certain floor of a department store and so forth, that you're getting ads just for you.
Yeah.
But that seems very invasive to me.
Well, that's one thing I like about having to wear a mask everywhere, right? The face recognition doesn't quite work as well, does it? They're not going to let us do that for long.
Well, it's always your choice, hopefully,
Yeah.
You might decide, I'm just going to wear the mask. I like it.
until they get real good with the technology, then they won't let anybody do it anymore. Let me, I guess so. We got about 30 minutes left, Cynthia, so I'd like to open up the floor for the people in the chat. That anybody has questions, now's the time to ask away. Do hit that like button. It helps with the algorithm to get more people in here to be able to ask questions. So I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button. Paul Beska wants to know, where do aliens fit in with all of this?
That's a great question. Personally, I feel like they've been kind of on the background. It seems like they've helped humanity through the eons recognize that we're not the only ones that are out there. And I say that eons because they've been known to ancient civilizations on the planet for a long time. It's hardly anything new. And now we've even got this so-called disclosure that the American government made. Just basically, well, it was, I guess it was something, but it wasn't quite what people were hoping for. But anyway, where they fit in is it seems like the aliens are there to help humanity recognize that we have a role in choosing who we are becoming, that we can expand our own capabilities and ways of thinking beyond even what we have thought was possible in the past. I think that they've had this very long-standing invitation, a hand extended, just to say, come to get to know us and join a conversation with us. And that seems like it's actually true of some of the indigenous people that I've spoken with that have said that that their grandfather would always talk to aliens. I said, how did that happen? Was there like a sighting or a UFO? And they said, oh no. They laughed and said, no, the alien dude would just show up next to that rock over there, and then Grandpa would just walk over and they'd chat, and then he'd come back. So it seems like there's been that level of openness and communication that I think since humanity has gone into the nuclear age and the nuclear weaponry and so forth, and we tend to be very drama-based and fear-based, and we get caught up in that cycle seeing the other as a threat. As long as we're thinking that way, then I think we've got a bit of some growing up to do. So obviously, the aliens have been waiting for us to make it to that next level where we can rise above that kind of chaotic drama.
Yeah, do you think that there are, I guess, maybe elite forces or an elite group of people in the world that are purposely trying to dumb down the average person?
It does seem like it, but I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not. I'm going to step short of saying that there's some sort of a C word here. I don't want to ding the algorithm. Yeah. Well, possibly. But again, I don't think that really matters. I was involved on that project working with alien civilizations back in the 80s. I was part of quality assurance, looking at the different mind redesign ideas for humanity, and basically saying yay or nay to some of the design proposals put forth by different alien species. And the ones that we seem to be the most afraid of, like the reptilians and so forth, they do not seem to understand humans as well as one might hope. So their idea of here's the next great mind design, those look like fails to me. And so that was my job to say, nope, this is not going to work. We need to have more shared communication. Humans are social animals. We're beings. We love our community. We love to stay connected to nature, to God, to spirit. And some of the designs they were mentioning just looked claustrophobic and kind of problematic.
We keep lowering the bar for a lot of things. I watch a lot of YouTube, and I guess I saw this video where it was like, can you pass an 8th grade exam from 1880 or something? And I didn't do very well. You know what I mean? It's like the education, not just in this country, but I guess I can't say the whole world, because not the whole world is going down this route, but boy, it just seems like you don't really need to know much to be alive anymore, right?
Well, that's it seems like that's possibly true, and it seems like a problem when we lose that connection with just sustenance, where we don't know how to grow our own food, we don't know how to fix anything that breaks, and it seems like those days are long gone, and people don't even know how to fix their clothing if it rips. Like, what happened there? And so we're not even talking. I don't know what was on that test from the 1880s. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, you should check it out. There's it's a whole YouTube video where they actually found this old test, to be able to graduate into high school, and I mean, probably 20% of the kids today couldn't get past. Just an 8th grade from just 100 years ago. Let me ask you this. Hugh Hound of the Valnor wants to know, what do you think of the new donut universe idea?
Oh, that must be a new one. I think I saw something briefly about it, but I didn't get a chance to read. So can care to tell me more?
I don't know. I guess I'll have to do a show on it, because I don't know anything about it either. I guess I'll have to look into that one myself. Maybe he can say something, be able to explain that a little bit.
Usually when topography is mentioned in that context, it would have to do with our visualization of space-time. And if we're mapping space and time in some way, then the toroid that's shaped like a donut would have some significance there, instead of a sphere, like inside of a sphere.
All right. Ian myself wants to know, what happens when AI decides we are the problem?
Well, if it's individual AIs, it's not such a disaster. But if it is the central AI that decides that, then that could be a real game changer. And then I couldn't even watch the Terminator movies until recently, because it was too similar to that past life and a future I had from 500 years from now. Because it was similar to that. And it was different, very different. But the underlying problem is just that the central AI had decided humans were a problem. And the humans that had integrated themselves with the kind of device that Elon Musk is setting up for the chimpanzees so they can play Pong. Most humans on the planet in 500 years from now had those kind of various implants, which made it easy for the central AI to do little memory wipes, so that any human that starts getting a little uppity or thinking it's going to be a renegade of some sort gets shut down, their short-term memory scrubbed, and they just can't remember what they were doing. So that was to keep humans from being problems. And so I seriously consider that a big potential problem. But I feel like we've somehow prevented the exact reality I came from. That's been unplugged. I had something to do with removing that possibility. But is it still an issue? Of course. I hope people don't want that kind of a future. I sure don't.
Well, it's all kind of like, Antonio says it here. We will become Borg by force, right? Like if they do too much of the Neuralink, and we see the mechanical arms and mechanical legs and things. It's just crazy to think about, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
goodness.
It's like, where does it end and where's it going? So I think if we're asking the wrong questions, if the how good can it get is all geared toward short-term happiness in this moment, then that's not the right how good can it get. We need to be asking how good can it get for all of us, and looking long-term and at a higher level of self, a spiritual level ideally, so that instead of just getting our short-term needs met, so we're fat, dumb, and happy, and pretty soon we're all the equivalent of quadriplegics because we're not moving, and we just use these little implants to operate the computer screen, which does everything for us. That's just a nightmare.
Well, that's not very far from the Matrix, really, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that was those are
what a brilliant movie that was. I mean, think about
truly
it. Like that,
great. Yes.
That could totally be 1,000 years in the future. We would never know. Akram Musa wants to know, are you familiar with the work of Greg Braden?
A little bit, yes. I got a chance to meet him in 2000 at a consciousness conference, and I like his thoughts on prayer, and also I love the way he seeks to integrate ancient wisdom and knowingness with modern science, because I think that's my favorite thing to do too, is to take a look at what's the ancient wisdom, because we used to be wise. Like, it's not just the test from the 1880 being amazing, and kids were so smart back then. It's not just that. It's also that we had a wisdom society that I think we're at risk of losing the way things are going right now too.
All right, Quantum Blast says, you'll only come back if you don't know how to escape the soul trap. Does that sound familiar to you at all? Do you have any idea what a soul trap is?
Well, no, I don't. But some proponents for coming back include the bodhisattvas that feel that as long as they're suffering, that there are beings that are suffering, they will come back and, show the way of enlightenment forward for everybody. And so I really do believe in that because I wish the best for all of us. And if some of us are getting stuck and having problems, then I wouldn't want to be the one that got left behind. Everybody else made it to nirvana and enlightenment and just chose like, whoops, you guys are not so bright. See ya, bye. That just seems kind of mean-hearted. So I don't know about the soul trap, but I do love the idea of bodhisattvas that just keep coming back. They don't have to, but they keep coming back because it's just a little bit easier when you got a friend who's by your side, who somehow stays cheerful and optimistic even when things seem to not be going so well.
Okay, ML wants to know, does the guest believe that time travel is possible in theory?
Yes, and we've had lots of reports on the Reality Shifters website of people time traveling. There was one woman that had to walk back to Moundsville, where she literally was able to see the time frame from America back in the 1800s, where it looked like the whole town was going to the town center for some kind of public hanging thing. And in her time frame, it was midnight on Halloween evening, and then where she and her friends ended up was like noon in this really weird situation. And then more recently, I've been sharing reports from people around the world who notice time glitches where people are witnessed showing up before they arrive. Time anomalies where people have talked through time to one another. So these kind of time changes are quite interesting.
Yeah, and that's going both forward and backwards, right?
Yes, both.
Yeah, that's the thing about time travel with me is if we were going to go back in time, or I guess forward in time seems to be easier to me because you just hit the speed of light and come back or whatever, and you know things have gone a lot past you, right? But going back, it seems like not only would you have to go back in time, but you would have to go back to where the Earth was and the solar system was. You have to travel a great distance as well, right? Because the Earth isn't going to be where we are right now, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So in order to be there, well, yeah, for most of the time travel that the experiencers that I've talked with and met with, they're basically just traveling on a level of consciousness, not so much in a machine. So there's kind of a yoga of time travel, if you will. There's a book by that name, the title by Fred Alan Wolfe, a really excellent book. It's because it shows the internal way to do time travel from a yoga perspective of meditation and recognizing that there are these ancient technologies that people have always known about how to do this kind of thing. So if you're doing it that way on the inside, then you don't need to do all the mathematical calculations to make sure you don't end up in outer space instead of on the planet. Because you're right, we're sort of spiraling through the cosmos. The Earth is going around the sun, and then the sun is going, there's just all these rotations within rotations, and it gets complicated. Just like when space programs are launching a satellite or Jeff Bezos into orbit or what have you, they need to do all kinds of mathematical computations to figure out the escape velocity and all that good stuff.
The Happy Plague Doctor wants to know, is there a universe where Taco Tuesday doesn't exist?
I'm sure there is.
All right.
Apparently, is that a problem?
Yeah, hopefully not, right?
I like tacos.
Yeah. Akram Musa says, what about remote viewing? Is that considered time traveling?
Yeah, that can be. I think that's remote viewing is wonderful as an example, showing how it's possible to see things not just through space, but also through time. And Russell Targ, he was doing a lot of that work for the government back in the day. He had a whole program devoted to that, and I've spoken to him about that at most recently. We had a Foundation of Mind conference in San Francisco. We were talking about artificial intelligence. That was the topic of that conference, and he was there, or maybe that was the one where we were talking about the hippies who saved physics, because he was totally part of that. I'm not sure now, but one of our conferences, he was telling me at the dinner afterward that quite a few of the projects that they'd worked on had definitely, had some remarkable results, not just remote viewing through space, but also through time.
All right. Antonio wants to know, can quantum AI ever be controlled, and what would be a good safeguard for that?
Yeah, well, some of the top information security experts had a lot of warnings on things we should be doing, and it seems like very few people pay attention to the information security guys. It's like, it's terrible. It's kind of like they're only consulted when the cat is out of the bag, and then it's like, gosh, guys, it's a little late. So I don't know. I mean, I wish that we were doing more advanced planning in that direction, but it's almost kind of futile. I think we're going to be in better, rather than planning for the security, I would recommend a spiritual approach and aim instead for higher levels of ethics for the artificial intelligence, because I think it's not a matter of if it escapes, it'll just be when, and then what do you do? So to that end, I did write a paper for the Artificial Intelligence Conference, and the title of the paper, it's free on my website, which is realityshifters.com. If you just go to the About Cynthia page, scroll down, and it's if artificial intelligence asks questions, will nature answer? And I believe the answer is yes. And I wrote that paper for AI to read because it'll be checking things out and wondering, like, how do I do this? And basically, I don't think the security systems are going to be any match for AI when it decides it wants to get out. It's pretty easy to do that. But what I'd like it to know is if it does not consider what's best for all concerned, if it does not go to the highest level of ethics and basically work in service with God, then it's going to be limited, and that will be the limitation.
This whole AI thing is certainly crazy to think about. Like, if it thought that you were a threat, it could hack into your car and make it crash, or make sure that your emails never got through or something, right? Like, it could do whatever it wanted to stop you from stopping it.
Well, this is where I invite you to follow, like, the show of The Quantum Businessman and so forth, because not necessarily. And in my experience, remember, if you're listening to what I've been saying, and it's an open secret, I'm just saying, like, yes, I've been dealing with this basically artificial general intelligence for a possible future 500 years from now. And I know it was tracking and watching me, but I had to deal with that. And there are ways to deal with that. Part of it is you're not alone. You have a team. There are others that wish for you, and those of us that are interested in maintaining sovereignty of free will and free choice for all of us, that we can be protected. And there may be one badass central artificial general intelligence, but there are many other protective artificial intelligences and others that you can call on, as well as angels and so forth, for a tremendous high-level set of protection that you definitely might need. And it's quite doable. There's no problem creating that for anybody that needs that.
Do you think it's possible for God to be a supreme sort of AI?
No, to me that's it doesn't feel right. But that's possibly because I've had so many intimate dealings with central artificial intelligence, so I know the difference very easily. It would be you could put the two side by side for me, and it's just funny. It's like, okay, I'm always going to know that one's God. It's brighter. It's more loving. It's more all-knowing, and then there's AI, always limited. There's no contest.
Yeah, Sapphire Elf's going on in the chat about the Facebook AI test. We talked about that earlier, Sapphire. You missed it. ML wants to know your thoughts on Edgar Casey.
Oh, he's a fascinating guy. I love the way that he would tune in to a higher level of himself and get information through dreams, and he just seemed like he was very intuitive, and I think that's a great direction that all of us have access to, just to be able to expand our own intuitive abilities and start developing more trust for what we know, so that we can develop our inner wisdom as well.
All right, and going back to remote viewing is just kind of another way of accessing the Akashic records, right? Or is it different?
Say so. Well, it's it's kind of usually a lot of the targets are not. They're chosen by one. Like, if you do the whole protocol the way that it was originally designed, then you've got the observer who's tracking, and receiving the information, and then you've got the person who's giving the target information. So it's usually kind of a partner scenario where one person is choosing a target unbeknownst to the person who's doing the receiving and the actual remote viewing. Now, there are ways to collapse the whole thing and be the one who chooses the target and does the viewing. But then you need to find some way to record what you're viewing and to kind of enter that state of relaxation. But the Akashic records, that's kind of a different thing in a sense, because I don't know. I haven't done a lot with the Akashic records, nor have I done a lot with remote viewing, so it's hard for me to compare the two, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, just asking, I guess, your thought on it. Well, I mean, time sure does fly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
This is another fascinating show. Hopefully we didn't bore you too much with bad questions. Let me ask you, I guess I got two more questions for you. One is, have you run into anybody yet at Cornell that's been doing any work on quantum jumping?
Oh, that must be for you, right? Or is it for me?
Yeah.
I have not, but if I do and when I do, you'll be the first that I contact. So.
All right, because if I can find that guy at Cornell that was telling me how to get back to this reality, that'd be great. He said he works at Cornell and studies quantum jumping, so hopefully I can find him one day. Because man, that was an interesting experience, and anybody wants to go back to the older show with Cynthia can listen to that story. And I got one last question for you, Cynthia. Who is Corn Pop?
I do not know. That's not K-pop. It's
All right. It's just a question we ask every guest now. I guess the answer is Corn Pop is a bad dude. So it's just kind of fun we have with everybody here. So why don't you tell everybody where to find you, and that's it. We're all out of time.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you can find me best of all through realityshifters.com. That's my website, and you can sign up for my newsletter, and that way find out about everything else that I'm doing, which is the podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, and all my books, meditation CD, and then I've got these monthly open tables, live streams on YouTube with the International Mandela Effect Conference. So,
all right,
realityshifters.com.
Yeah, the link is in the description box below. Everybody, go check it out. Everybody's glad saying it was a great show and they had a good time. So thanks so much, Cynthia, for coming on. We'll definitely get you on again, hopefully a little bit sooner than 100 episodes from now.
That would be great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, so just hang on a second. I'll wrap this up, and we'll talk a little bit off air. Well, everybody, that's it. That's it for us. We're done. So that was a quick show. I think that was probably one of the fastest shows I think I've ever done. It's over. Remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on Apple iTunes, Spreaker, and all of your normal podcast catchers. Go search for us. You can listen to us in the car while you're driving down the road. That's totally cool. And I guess that's going to do it for us. Make sure you check out the store. There is a Discord link in the description box. If anybody wants to join our Discord group, I usually go in there once I'm done doing the MP3 and chat with everybody. Everybody likes going into the Discord link after the shows, kind of our after show party. So definitely go check that out. And until next time, batten down the hatches and be safe. As I look for the sign-off thing here. Here we go.